The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingrassia, Alderman Kotar, Alderman Gunther, Alderman Vollmer, Alderwoman Martin, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Green, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Navarro, President Reed,
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Ingrassia, Alderman Kotar, Alderwoman Martin, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Rhodey, Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, 16 present.
A quorum being present, I'll ask everyone in the chambers and the galleries who's able to stand to please rise for prayer. Giving all honor to God, Almighty God, source of all authority, we humbly ask guidance in our deliberations and wisdom in our conclusions. Amen. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th.
My honored guest, Mr. Lou Hamilton, Clinton McBride from the Laborers Union, and Demetrius Alfred from Firefighters Local 73, and Nathan Lett, also from Firefighters Local 73.
All right, welcome. Alderman from 13th.
Yes, President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guest Jeff Hans, my neighbor and constituent, Keith Taylor, I don't see, there you go, and Shannon Weber from the Carpenters Union. Shannon's back there.
Alderman from 27th.
President, I'd like to honor Frederick Searcy, Director of Minority Recruitment, as my honored guest.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'm actually running out of honored guests, but I have Greg Meyer from the President of Phillies Park Neighborhood Association. The rest of them all been introduced.
All right. Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman from the 11th.
You said second, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to have Anthony Lancia with the Association of General Contractors as my honored guest. Thank you.
The alderman from the 22nd always defers to you when you're up, even though he had been standing for a while. Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have Chris Pickle with AT&T as my special guest, as well as Dave Sweeney and Sonette Magnus with Lewis and Rice.
All right, welcome. Any further introductions? Any further inductions? We also have with us Paul Feller from 8th Ward. He's the committee man and running for alderman in the 8th Ward. Let's give him a round of applause. Welcome. Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, we're gathered here on January 5th. On this day in 1914, the minimum wage of $5 a day was approved. Well, and on this day in 1961, the alderman from the 23rd found his favorite actor, and still his favorite actor, and still confuses him when Mr. Ed debuted. Thank you.
We also have with us Gary. Gary, could you please stand? Gary Boyd, and you guys probably know Gary from that show, Them Your People, which is now syndicated, so it's all over the country. But welcome, Gary. I'm glad you come and hang with us, even though you're international and national now. Let's give him a round of applause. Thanks for approval of the minutes.
We have none.
Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes.
We dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We would dispense with line items 8, 9, and 10. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 221, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingrassia, an ordinance approving the petition to establish the EQH Market Street Community Improvement District, finding a public purpose therefore, and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 222, sponsored by President Reed, and an ordinance directing the Public Safety Director to complete an annual public safety plan and present the findings of the plan to members of the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Aldermen Public Safety Committee. Board Bill 223, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 5522 Delmar. Board Bill 224, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute an agreement and contract of sale for the sale of property between St. Louis and Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, providing for the sale of approximately 1.3994 acres of property owned by St. Louis for the sum of $80,000, authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute a quitclaim deed to the agreement entitled Form of Quitclaim Deed for St. Louis property, remising, releasing, conveying, and forever quitclaiming to Ameren the St. Louis property subject to the abrogation, easement, and restrictive covenants as defined and provided for in said quitclaim deed and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 225, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller, owner and operator of St. Louis Lambert International Airport to enter into and execute the First Amendment to the restated and amended lease agreement AL 223 between the city and Signature Flight Support Corporation, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 226, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis, the owner and operator of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, to enter into and execute the First Amendment to the lease agreement AL 222 between the city and MHS Travel and Charter Incorporated, amending the lease agreement AL 222 dated June the 25th, 2013, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 227, sponsored by Alderman Arnowitz, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute an agreement or agreements with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the receipt of lead hazard reduction demonstration grant funds, appropriating the sum of $2,100,000, which the city has been awarded for the LHRD program, authorizing and directing the Director of the Community Development Administration to contract with municipal agencies, nonprofit corporations, and other entities as described for the expenditure of the LHRD funding, and directing the comptroller to issue warrants thereon upon the city treasury and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of our first reading.
Madam Clerk, please assign Board Bill 220 to HUD's.
So noted.
Reference to committee.
to the Public Safety Committee, Board Bills 222, to the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 221, to the Neighborhood Development Committee, Board Bill 223, to the Housing Committee, Board Bill 227 and 220, and to the Transportation and Commerce Committee, Board Bills 224, 225, and 226. That's the extent of reference to committees.
We'll dispense with line items 13 and 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 208, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commissioner, Comptroller, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, transfer of up to $13,727,769 of excess monies that the city intends to transfer from the Debt Stabilization Fund to the Airport Revenue Fund in accordance with sections of the Lambert-St. Louis International Airport Indenture of Trust between the city as grantor and UMB Bank as trustee, authorizing transfer in the amount not to exceed $13,727,769 from the DSSF into the Revenue Fund, containing a severability and an emergency clause, Board Bill 209, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into a second amendment to the Fuel System Lease and Use Agreement, AL 442 to the St. Louis Lambert International Airport Fuel System Lease and Use Agreement between the city and STL Fuel Company, LLC, dated December the 22nd, 2011, as amended by the First Amendment to the Fuel System Lease and Agreement, dated April the 7th, 2014, the Second Amendment, which is dated here too and attached, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th and seconded by the Alderman from the 10th and 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We dispense with line item 16 and 17. Third reading, report of engrossments.
Board Bill 190, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, an ordinance pertaining to the administration and use of the parking meter fund and repealing subsection B2 of Section 2 of Ordinance 70611.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the third reading, final passage of Board Bill 190.
Mr. President, please place Board Bill 190 on the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, at the request of the sponsor, place Board Bill 190 on the third reading informal calendar.
So noted. That's the extent of third reading, report of engrossment, and final passage.
Report of enrollment.
We have none.
Courtesy resolution. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the courtesy resolution calendar.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of the courtesy resolution calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th and seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. First reading resolutions.
Resolution 188, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, the Board of Aldermen approves that the Streets, Traffic, and Refuse Committee is hereby delegated the authority to compel via subpoena the members of the Parking Commission, members of the Parking Commission staff to appear before the Streets, Traffic, and Refuse Committee and to compel the production of documents and records if, after receiving reasonable notice from the chairperson of the committee.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the first reading resolution 188.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman.
Yes, Mr. President, the Parking Commission has not had a meeting since June of 2017. The commission as a whole has no idea what's really going on with the parking division. The treasurer has basically obstructed our way of doing business, and she's doing things that's inconsistent with state statute and local law. And we need to have an interview with her and her staff on what's going on, get an update on the operations of the parking division as a whole and where we stand as a parking commission. She's basically taken an autocratic stance on running that office with no input of the commissioners, and we like to have hearings to find out more information about what's going on. as far as finance and as far as policy.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the motion.
I move for adoption of Resolution 188.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extended first reading of resolutions.
Second reading.
Following resolution was reported out of the Legislation Committee, Resolution 169 as amended, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro and Alderman Muhammad. The Board of Aldermen register our support for the prompt initiation of a comprehensive, independent financial audit of the city.
Alderman from the 23rd, you recognize on this. Okay, Madam, well, as they're putting it on the desk, we're not going to pass it until it's on the desk, but Alderman from the 23rd, you recognize on the second reading of Resolution 169 as amended.
So a couple, well, the Alderwoman from the first, excuse me, has said she has not had the time to look it over, and I guess a couple other people. So for this week, I'll put it on the informal calendar.
Okay.
But I will bring it up next week for sure. So I would ask everyone to get, it'll be on your desk, read it. I wouldn't see why anybody in this room would be against an audit of the city. I think it's important that we do this. I really would rather have gotten it through today, but I want to be fair to everybody in their votes. So definitely going to bring it up next week. I would ask to have it be put on the informal calendar until next Friday.
All right, Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Place Resolution 169 as amended on the resolution's informal calendar.
So noted.
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Tuesday, January the 9th, Streets and Traffic and Refuse Committee meeting at 9 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Also, on Tuesday, Intergovernmental Affairs Committee meeting at 11 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Wednesday, Legislation Committee meeting 10 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Also, Parks Committee meeting 10:30 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Thursday, Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting 10 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Friday, full board meeting 10 a.m. in the Chambers. That's the extent of my announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move that we excuse the Alderman from the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, 17th, 19th, and 24th for necessary absence.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 18th, you recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board adjourns until Friday, January 12th, 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned.